Warning, this content is for entertainment and educational purposes only. This video is brought to you by First Detachment Nutrition. Battle tested, expert formulated. Use discount code AB10 at checkout for 10% off. All right, folks, Big Paul here today with Kurt Havens and Coach Kolton. What's going on, guys?
Howdy.
We're going.
We're here for another episode of Muscle Science. People love these muscle science episodes. We're going to talk about the science of Nandrolone by popular request today. Everybody wanted Nandrolone, Kurt. So let's talk about some Deca and NPP. Cool.
Okay. So Nandrolone was discovered in 1950, or first described in 1950. It was discovered by a guy named Birch. I keep bringing this guy up in all our videos because he was kind of responsible for a lot of the modern drugs. He was looking for...
He's our Lord and Savior.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, for bodybuilders, yes. He was looking for a way to basically reduce testosterone to estrogen to bypass hydrolysis. So he was trying to speed up a process. Assuming he was looking to find other drugs out of this process. And the reduction that he invented is named after him. It's called the Birch reduction. So from that, he discovered all the 19 knowers basically out of this process. But Nandrolone was the first one. And then all the other 19 knowers are basically based on Nandrolone from there, chemically. Nandrolone is actually a naturally occurring hormone in humans. It's in the blood of humans at like a 1:50 ratio of testosterone, at least in men. So it's detectable in like a minuscule amount. And in women, it's detectable at a much larger amount during pregnancy. I think it actually might be one of the hormones that contributes to fetal growth. So,
that's interesting that it contributes to fetal growth. I did not know that. I knew that it does occur naturally, like in just small amounts, right? It's a very, very minuscule amount in your body. I mean, what is the biological purpose really for having that in?
It's like an intermediate between testosterone and estrogen. So during the aromatase process, it's one of the metabolites that's kicked off. What it was outside of that proposed theory on fetal growth, they're not really sure what else its intended purpose in the body is. So it's not really in any amount that's causing much of anything. They do know in women, though, if you stimulate estrogen receptors in women, that it doesn't cause muscle growth. In men, it does. Women respond to progesterone for muscle growth. So that's where the theory came from. Is that because it's a progestin?
And how was it synthesized? Did he just find it naturally in the human body? He's like, let's see what we can do with this.
No, they realized after that it was found in humans. So it was called Birch reduction. So he basically was just reducing testosterone a different way. Rather than the standard way was hydrolysis. And he was trying to figure out a faster way by using ammonia. And this molecule was born.
That's so cool.
He worked out of Oxford. He's Australian, but I believe he was like a scientist at Oxford University at the time.
That is
and
so
thus cool. the golden age of bodybuilding was born.
Yeah, but it was at the same time as all the other, like Searle was the biggest one, invented drugs. I think they came up with like 1,000 analogs of testosterone in a year. I mean, the goal was to beat the Russians at the sports, right? So in the Olympics, that's what kind of the race. I think they all told the FDA that it was for anemia and all these other things. It was the guy who invented D-ball basically sat down with the Russian Olympic team and he got them drunk and they admitted that they were doing testosterone. And he was a physician and he said, I can one up this. So he went home and he made D-ball and sold it to SIBA. And that was kind of the beginning of that whole thing. And then I guess in Europe, they saw this happening. So then they were rushing to come up with their own drugs.
What's the for bodybuilders? Let's talk through Nandrolone, the good, the bad, the ugly with Nandrolone. What effects can people expect from Nandrolone?
Well, it has a much stronger binding affinity to the androgen receptor than testosterone. So in that respect, it would cause more protein synthesis. So I would say it's probably one of the better steroids for mass. I don't know what's your personal experience with that is.
For me, I grow the best off of Nandrolone out of anything.
It's lacking the non-genomic stuff, though, which is basically
just don't tell our friend Victor Black that.
Exactly, right. It doesn't have any of the non-genomic stuff, though, that testosterone does. So it's missing. So even though it's really strong on the one end, it's not so much on the other end. So non-genomic is basically like the androgen receptor that doesn't go into the nucleus to do DNA. So it's it's not hitting any of those receptors.
That's interesting. Is it just not fitting into that keyhole, or?
Yeah, it doesn't bind to that receptor.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, anecdotally I've seen the same. It's definitely, especially in that post-contest phase, it's a wonderful compound, absolutely wonderful compound.
Yeah, that's when I use it, when I'll deploy it. I run NPP in my post-contest phase, like during my rebound. I'll run it for like 6 to 8 weeks, but I can't sustain it through an off season, man. I just have too much anxiety and just other issues, man. Anxiety and impotence are the issues that I run into long term.
Yeah.
It doesn't really aromatize either, so that's probably some of that anxiety is from if your estrogen's crashed from it too.
I don't know. My estrogen's always high.
Is it when you ran Nandrolone solo? It was high.
Oh no! When I ran Nandrolone by itself, no, I didn't get any of the psychological side effects when I ran Nandrolone by itself.
That's interesting.
So I think the progesterone nature of Nandrolone is what's it basically makes the estrogen receptor more receptive. So you're like magnifying the effect by adding testosterone to it.
This is what I've always found interesting, because women that take progestogenic birth control methods are more often, I think it's almost 1/3 of them are prescribed antidepressants. So there's something with that progestin activity happening, whether that's like the hypothalamus. I've read a lot of
it cross into the brain. So yeah,
so and it's because that's across the board. You typically hear it causes anxiety or incompetence, or there are all sorts of psychological effects that one might achieve from using Nandrolone.
Yeah, progesterone itself has a lot of very odd effects mentally. Like there's a definite sweet spot for men and women, and if you're on either side of it, there's issues.
What's weird with me is I never had issues with it until I got older. I used to run Deca all the damn time, no issues with it at all, and then it's just like as I've gotten older, I'm super sensitive to it. So I don't know if something has changed in my biology or brain chemistry or whatever, but it seems to affect me more strongly now.
Well, I mean, every 7 or so years, you basically have a whole new body. All of your things are changed over. So it's very possible that over time you just don't react to it anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it was for a long time. It was my favorite compound to run for size. I would run just Deca, sometimes by itself. A lot of times I used to run it by itself. Or I know like the old school, like the 70s bodybuilders, it was D-ball and Deca. That's what the guys would run in the off season, right?
Yeah. Danny Padilla, I think, ran it solo, right? Danny and
Mike Mincer.
And what was the Black Prince? What's his name? Robbie Robertson?
Robbie Robertson.
I think the two of them basically ran Deca solo.
Yeah, that was the old Mike Mincer thing where he would run those Deca only cycles, like 3 grams is what I heard.
I did that once. And I had a pretty bad experience. It was when I was younger, and man, nothing has ever shot my blood pressure up nearly as much as when I did Deca only. It was quite interesting. Like I got bloody noses all the time. I mean, it was horrible. It was truly bad. And then the anxiety and I got all of that, like all the bad stuff. So I was like, I'm probably not going to do this again.
Yeah, and I don't, I'm not sure if I'm correct about this, but from what I recall, I think both Mike and his brother died from cardiovascular related issues, right?
I think his brother died from kidney disease, but
was it kidney disease?
Yeah, they died with like a day apart, right, in the same apartment.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you look on PubMed, for example, of course this is rodent data, but Nandrolone or its derivatives are quite correspondent to like myotrophic or like the myocardium expanding, like growth of the left ventricular and dysfunction of the heart. So there's something there. I just don't know if it's applicable in humans. Obviously, some of what we do is always going to be, no matter what androgen it is, and who's to say it's Nandrolone over any other compound. But
when people go and get those scans, they probably haven't just used Nandrolone alone.
Yeah, that's the hard thing.
Who in the bodybuilding community only runs Deca at this point.
Yeah, like there's not a controlled study that would show one person who has ran only Nandrolone for 10 years and not used any other substance. That would be insane.
Yeah, and that's why I don't know. I sort of take these studies with context too, because there's really we're our cohort is a lot of the stuff just doesn't apply to it.
Yeah.
When even the rat stuff, like you said, Kolton, like they're phasing the rat stuff out now that they have more of the genome understood. The rat stuff's irrelevant.
Yeah, which is exciting because it is so. It's one of those things that a lot of some educators in our community bind themselves to. They're like, we have to use this research, and like it's pretty valuable. Like there's rarely an instance where we can look at ourselves in comparison to a rodent, and likewise, there's rarely an instant where our environment is controlled as a rodent, and extrapolating any data from what happened in a rodent is really tough. Maybe there's some mechanism you can pull apart from it, but outside of that, it's like, man, what's the conclusion that can be drawn from that data is, ew, like, I don't want to make that. Yeah. You know?
When also, depending on what muscle they used in a rat too, it's going to change.
Exactly.
Right? Where you and I have pretty much, it's evenly dispersed, the androgen receptor. In a rat, it's not. So yeah. That's what the anabolic androgenic rating stuff.
I was just going to say.
It was on roosters and rats, and you know.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, those Hirschberg assays are useless, right?
Yeah.
Everyone likes to use them still, though.
At some point, I need to go back through and redo my PED profiles that I have up. I have them on all of them, but it's just what I took from the anabolic reference guide. I know people get hot and contested about it. Yeah, Bill, and some of them I think Bill Llewellyn just made up.
Yeah, well, the EQ stuff, you definitely kind of, it's a little off on that. But I think that they are, like, the same as us, we do what we can with what we have, right? So it changes all the time. Like, we're still studying equipoise. We're still studying nandrolone. We don't know everything about it. No one can say that they fully, even testosterone, do we fully understand testosterone? Definitely not.
Yeah, I mean, it's some of the most recent studies that we have on trenbolone, for example, in humans is toxicity studies done on humans eating cow meat that had too much of a concentration of trenbolone in it, and then looking long term what that did in humans. And it's interesting that we have to get that nuance to see anything of what it might do.
Did you ever see that? There's the one called like the hamburger study.
Yes,
they injected tren right into the meat.
Yeah, that's awesome. That'd be so cool.
So I think a common misconception too is that people think nandrolone is not as androgenic as testosterone, right? It's just that it converts so readily to dihydronandrolone, which is not that androgenic, and that binds the receptor. That goes back to, like we were talking about, like erectile dysfunction a little bit. But this is where I've gotten a lot of people DMing me about using finasteride. Nandrolone, that's a disaster waiting to happen, because you basically flip it back to nandrolone, which will bind right to the AR on the hair and cause your hair to come out.
Right, and it has more affinity for that AR.
Oh yeah,
yeah. That's I've seen that so many times, because people think like, oh, I'll just take this pill and I'm good. Most of the time, if you're not just taking testosterone only, you're just pissing in the dark again.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting how it does that. What about the progestinic, or not progestinic, but prolactin issues with 19-nors and specifically nandrolone?
Prolactin with?
Everybody like freaks out about prolactin with nandrolone, and I have never really seen it on.
I've never seen it with that. I've seen it with tren, but that's from a different. That's because it's doing. It's interacting with different stuff there. That's not. Colt, have you ever seen elevated prolactin from nandrolone?
Never.
No, but all these dumbass gym bros are freak out and take Caber with Deca. It's like, I'm like, I don't think you need Caber with Deca. I've never seen an elevated prolactin levels from taking Deca or NPP.
It's the best way I can explain it with at least tren is that it's slowing down your thyroid, right? So it's trying to, that's the nutrient partitioning effect, is if you're burning off all your food, you're oxidizing everything you eat, you're not going to grow any muscle. So it basically slows their metabolism down, but by slowing thyroid down, it raises prolactin. So then these guys, and prolactin actually aids in androgen receptor binding. I think I sent you, I think I sent you a study on that. So then guys were shooting themselves in the foot by taking Caber with it.
Yeah. It
doesn't make any sense. And also Caber is a wretched drug on its own.
Right. And like, that's the thing, is you can look at studies using that, any of those compounds that inhibit, and man, that comes with its own slew of cardiovascular health issues and
mental problems too, right?
And that's the whole thing. It's like, oh my God.
Dopamine agonist withdrawal syndrome.
Yeah. And it's, I think what really perpetuated that was people assumed that if they aren't able to have an erection that's a high quality while they're on nandrolone, likely that means they have an elevated prolactin, and that's usually not the case. And
no, I agree.
That blood work to.
No, I would say I think the best. You guys can correct me if you've seen something different. I think it's probably multifaceted. I don't think there's one answer. It's if it's DECA alone, right, DHN is not going to be able to cause an erection. Right. You're missing DHT. I think if you run with test, and it's an individual thing, depending on where your test level is and where your nandrolone level is, if the estrogen gets too elevated, it's going to cause that issue, right? The estrogen, a DECA alone also is going to crash your estrogen, which is going to cause that issue. Again, there's like that sweet spot. And I don't think, there's no easy way to, like, if you have a client who's experiencing this, unless you know their whole story, it's kind of hard to even figure out what is causing it. Exactly. And I don't think Huber's the answer on that one at all.
No, it's almost never the answer. That's why I always say, like, test, don't guess. And you're always going to be better off if you look at it. Even, I mean, there's a lot of stuff happening intracellularly that we're not able to test for, but it's still going to show us a broader view of, like, hey, this is the milieu of what you're doing with this compound in your system. And maybe nandrolone just isn't for you, which is fine.
What do you guys think about? I know, like, I feel like I've had positive experiences with it, and I feel like it goes back to the golden era of running a DHT like primo with it. I feel like the result is better and the feeling is better.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like a little bit of just enough test for estrogen, a DHT, and then an nandrolone, right? But let the DHT drive a lot of the protein expression and just top it off with nandrolone.
Yeah.
Right. And then supply estrogen on the bottom. I think that's the smart way to do it. I think these guys, run 1,000 tests and 1,000 DECA, and they wonder why nothing feels good.
What I've seen with a lot of pro bodybuilders that I have talked to, now keep this in mind, this is just what these dudes are doing. They run test, primo, and then they'll just have a sprinkle of nandrolone in with it.
Yeah,
like
that makes sense. Because on a milligram for milligram basis, in theory, nandrolone doesn't do anything test won't do as far as muscle growth is concerned, right? It's not. I think it seems to pack on more mass. But I have no proof of that, like just anecdotal. But like on a milligram basis, it's the same strength. So there's no reason to like really leverage it that hard, right? And you could leverage safer things, I think.
And I think a lot. I mean, I do believe it has the propensity to add more lean tissue accrual, but I think a lot of what people may think is lean tissue is just that retentive state that nandrolone puts you in.
Yeah. Water and mineral retention.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely holds nitrogen. Probably better than most.
That's it. Is that when you're in that post-show window and you apply nandrolone, that sort of like fullness and heaviness you get is, I feel like it is that nitrogen retention, because it doesn't look like you just ate a fucking burger and you're like filled out. It looks like, man, like the vascularity and veininess and the specifically like the striations you see that come out more. It's like there's a different fullness there, and it expresses itself a little bit differently in that sense.
Well, I think there's always an anabolic response after a diet anyway, right? There's like that 2-week window where everything's just primed and ready to go.
Right.
Your body's going to store muscle tissue faster than it's going to store adipose tissue.
Right.
Yeah, and you don't need a ton in that post-show window. Like I literally, when I had that 50-pound rebound that I did, I think I ran 500 tests and like 150, like 50 milligrams of NPP every other day. It was really low. Yeah,
I mean, each 100 milligram shot of NPP, holds an incredible amount of nitrogen for like 2 weeks. One shot of NPP at 100 milligrams. Much longer duration than, and one shot of DECA holds nitrogen for 25 days at 100 milligrams.
Yeah, that's insane.
Now, again, that's not necessarily useful to bodybuilders at that dose, but it just, in general, it's just working really well at a low dose.
It's a good proxy. Yeah, it's a really good proxy.
Let's talk about the esters, the NPP versus DECA. Okay,
so it first came out as NPP, as Durabolin, medically, and then in 1960, I want to say. And then in 1962, it came out as decanoate ester. The NPP, again, some of those weird esters are hard to fully predict a half-life. That's why you don't ever get a definite answer. Between NPP, testcypinate, and parabolin, you always get these weird guesses. You don't ever find anything. When you add that weird benzene ring in the ester, it's unpredictable. So the best guess I could say is probably 5 days, maybe 7 days on NPP half-life, right? Where DECA is 14, pretty much.
Yeah, I've heard even less on NPP from
people. 3 days. I think it probably depends.
Yeah, I've heard 3.
It likely depends on the carrier oil, the injection location as well, and the method of injection, subcutaneous versus intramuscular. But it is
your unique physiology.
Yeah,
exactly. With the cytochrome P450s, where this does
how many carboxylases do you have? And yeah.
Like that's one of the reasons why testosterone cypionate is not usually used in studies, because it's not as predictable. They use Ananthate because it's like a straight release. We know exactly what's going to happen with it. So Nandrolone decanoate Deca became like the preferred medical use, probably because of patient compliancy, right? I mean, and you don't need to give it, especially in a child, you don't need to give them a shot every other day or every third day. You could give them a shot every 2 weeks. But NPP seems to be the more popular thing out now, right? That seems to be trendier in the market.
I agree.
I prefer NPP. I mean, for a couple of reasons. One, if you have problems, you can get out of it quick.
Yeah. I think that's exactly, like, usually with most compounds, especially in a prep, I would use shorter esters, not because they have any inherent unique effect, but because you can remove them if something does go wrong. You hold excessive water, or on the back end of the prep, you can enter sort of like a recovery phase much more quickly without having those longer esters in.
Yeah, because it'll peak faster too.
Yeah. What is it?
Changes. What's that?
Equipoise has like a crazy long half-life.
It's basically, if you ever run equipoise, you're always going to be on gear in some capacity.
Equipoise, I want to say equipoise takes 72 days to reach peak serum.
It's really long.
A lot of guys jump off before it's even ramped up. And then I was listening to an interview with Danny Padilla from years ago, and he was talking about Deca, and someone asked him, like, so when does Deca kick in? And he was like, right when you get off. But I think that's right. I think these people aren't patient with stuff, so everyone wants everything fast.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta. I have gotten. I was talking with Justin about this yesterday. I have completely changed up my approach to cycles, where I just slowly titrate up and I try to stay on as long as I fucking can using the least effective dose. And then when I get stuck or I see my body composition starting to decline, then I'll push it up a little bit more. I have found that to be more productive. I know, like, in talking to Justin, he's more of a proponent of just coming at it full force out of the gate.
I think the side effects are worse when you do that, though, aren't they?
Yeah, way worse. Like I had this period of where my blood pressure will shoot through the roof, and I have a bunch of water retention. It doesn't matter what I run if I go full blast right out of the gate. Whereas if I just ease myself into it over, say, an 8-week period of time and slowly titrate up, I don't get those issues.
Yeah. And it's like, it's more beneficial that way. I don't run cycles off of like a time proxy. I do it off of blood work. So I've had people on site, like, legitimately, I've had people on cycles for a year, sometimes longer, but their health permits it, right? And they do organ imaging, and they do the supplements, and they take the right appropriate measures. And if you're slowly doing that dose titration, you can start out at 250 milligrams and make the titration up to 1,000 milligrams, and then 1,500 milligrams. And by that time, yes, then you're starting to see some degradations in health, but you can run for, like, the progress you'll make is much more linear as compared to this fucking jagged, sharp-edged looking, like, horrible type shit.
And I think the food also needs to be proportional to the gear as well, right? If you're going to titrate one up, you got to bring the other one up.
Exactly.
What guys go wrong is they'll run 2 grams of something and they're eating 1,600 calories a day.
Yeah, it's crazy how you won't grow if you do that.
It doesn't matter how many drugs.
Yeah. When Greg Doucette brought out the whole main gaining thing, where it's just like eat maintenance calories, I'm like, have you ever coached anyone? Like, that doesn't work in practical, unless you're a freak. It doesn't work.
He got upset and commented on my video about main gaining.
I can't believe it, dude. I've never had a client who's exceptionally grown with.
I'm like, the whole concept is an oxymoron to begin with. You're either maintaining or you're gaining. And I laugh because he made a comment about how my channel was too small for him to roast me, but yet he was commenting. Man, but yeah, the whole main. I mean, just for me, like, just thinking about it logically, wouldn't you want to optimize each phase and be the most efficient? Right. I mean, the most efficient path from point A to B is a straight line. Wouldn't you want to do it in the most efficient way possible? If you're trying, I mean, main gaining, you're stressing yourself out with all these drugs and then not really getting a lot out of it.
Yeah. Right. I think Derek from More Plates, More Dates years ago said something about, you only have a finite amount of cycles in you. You don't know what that is when you start, right? It could be 1, right? You get a heart attack, or you might have 20. Right. Like, the reason why not to start when you're young or to do stupid stuff like just blast things without the food there is because it's a waste. Like you put your health in that place for no reason if you're not going to get anything out of it.
Yeah.
And here I am going on year 30 over here.
How much you eating?
What's that?
But you're eating.
Yeah, I mean, I look back at like the stuff I did in my 20s. My cycles were hilarious. I remember just doing 5 milligrams of D-ball a day.
Yeah, yeah.
That was a cycle.
I remember my first cycle was 250 milligrams of testosterone. I injected right after I won my PNBA pro card backstage when I was still natural. I had the 3cc needle backstage. I hit my glute right after I won because I was like, okay, I'm not natural anymore. And then like 2 weeks later, I threw in DHB thinking that would be like the
the secret.
Yeah. Boy, was it not that.
What were your thoughts? I get a lot of requests to do DHB, and I'm hesitant because there's like no human data on it at all.
Yeah, there's nothing. And it's like I never felt as toxic as I felt on DHB. Like it was.
I have seen blood work from a couple of people that ran DHB. I had one dude and his ALT and AST were over 1,000.
Yeah.
It's pretty toxic, right?
And the weird thing is I would inject and my piss would be like highlighter yellow afterwards. And I'm like, what? I've never fucking had that happen with anything. It's very strange.
Or the Tren P where it's yellow and foamy.
Yeah, you get foamy piss
too, but like still, it's gross.
Yeah.
There's like stuff that's like oily residue floating in it too.
Yeah, I wonder what is the deal with the Tren P. I know we're completely off the Nandrolone topic here, but
my understanding, it's worse with acetate than the longer esters. I think it's just a lot of the metabolites your kidneys are just getting rid of that they can't deal with because it's not supposed to be in your body. I'm sure some is organ stress, but most of it's just so like Tren acetate, it oxidizes really quickly.
Yeah, that's what gives it the golden color.
Yeah,
right?
like if you let it sit, even in an airtight bottle, it still oxidizes somehow.
Yeah,
that's when it gets more painful. But if you've ever seen like the raw, once it's made, it has to be like wrapped tight. Otherwise, it oxidizes and it stinks. It just smells like horrible. It smells like you're making meth.
It's funny you say that because like people will think, oh, my Tren's good if it's like hyper pigmented, and I'm like, dude, that's
like the opposite, right?
The color when it's brewed, like another tangent, but like Masteron and Manfate when it's first brewed is black. It's like tar. It's oily. Yeah. But it's a jet black, and then when it's filtered, it becomes like a golden color. But like the color doesn't dictate the quality of it. Just the color of it.
Oh, the bros with their stupid shit. All right, anything last little things we want to talk about, Nandrolone, before we wrap this up?
I'm curious about Kurt's opinion on its sort of cognitive effects. I've researched a lot into this. I've talked about it seemingly inhibits GABA. It changes spatial memory and hippocampal synaptic activity, like all these different components. It passes the blood-brain barrier quite effectively. So like on paper, it looks like it would be quite detrimental to one's.
Yeah, like at least in rats, right? They do like fear tests with them, and they react very differently.
Right.
Yeah, I'm sure it's not great for your brain from what I've seen.
Right. Neither is any super physiological dose of androgen, but I just think selectively this one might be.
Yeah, well, because if it was in the human body at a 1:50 ratio of testosterone, and now you got it at a 1:1,
or higher.
That's like, in theory, then I think testosterone therefore would be the safest, right? Because at least your body knows what to do with that. It just doesn't know what to do with Nandrolone.
Yeah.
And a lot of people get mental sides from Nandrolone.
I always feel chill and great when I'm on Test and Primo, and then I throw in Nandrolone, I start like my anxiety just slowly starts ratcheting up.
Yeah, and that's what, like, there's a lot of good case studies on PubMed you could look up, and it talks about it being an anxiolytic compound because it produces, like, because of, hypothetically, right, because of the reduction of GABA, which is the inhibitory neuron, you have excitatory neurons going crazy, and then it's just sort of like that fight or flight response to almost all things. Yeah.
I feel like MPP seems more anxious to me too than Deca does.
That's the interesting thing, actually. I've noticed that as well.
I feel worse on MPP because I feel like my heart's pounding. Where Deca is more mellow to me, but
it probably just has to do with the rate at what it hits you, right?
Yeah, it's just because the peak is probably not as high. But like Nandrolone, like Deca feels more like depressing to me though over time.
Yeah.
You have to become like apathetic.
Yeah, 100%. It's similar to Tren in that aspect where you lose sense of
you just don't care about anything.
Yeah.
I've gotten to that point with this is why another reason why I'll run NPP. Like I'll get to that point on Deca where I just feel awful emotionally, like anxiety, social anxiety, and then I can't get it to go away for like a month or two. And then whereas NPP, if I come off, it's like 10 days or so, I feel better.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like
it's to the point where I don't even know if I want to run it anymore.
Yeah. I feel like we're saying a lot of bad things about it. I think it has value, right? As an anabolic. I just think people need to be careful with the amount that they use and how they use it, and obviously pay attention to what you feel on it. Like you shouldn't ever feel not well on something.
Yeah, right. I feel like a sprinkle just goes a long way, and that's what I see a lot of the pros. So like I won't name a name of a pro, but the higher level pro that I have talked to, he was running 1250 test, 1,000 primo, and then 300 milligrams of Nandrolone a week. That was his off-season cycle. Yep.
Yeah, my rebound cycle was 300 milligrams of testosterone, 300 milligrams of primobolan or mastron, and 300 milligrams of NPP for 10 weeks, and that was it. And it was amazing. It was great.
I think the mastron probably fixed any of the issues that were there. Right?
It balanced out the DHT, hopefully. And
I think that's the key, is if guys run. I mean, the dumbest thing I think you could do, which again they used to do to some extent back in the day, I think, is running like D-ball with it's like your
PRT. Terrible.
And the look is not good either. You're like a bag of flour.
I love the D-ball. Oh boy, man, the gym bros love their D-ball. That's one we'll have to do next. And I think it's literally the worst anabolic you can take.
Probably. I mean, this cool stuff. I feel like the story behind it though is really cool.
It is a cool story.
It's got a lot of lore.
Yeah.
I mean, it does have some application for like a pre-workout, but like I just like everybody, they gain their 50 pounds and then in 6 weeks and then they lose it all. It's just, you look like a bloated Michelin man that's, you turn pink and blood pressure's through the roof. It's just not a good look, and it's not, I don't know. Grow boobs.
Like, the only other application I think is it has some synergistic effect with like Tren. If someone wants to run D-ball and Tren with no test, like, I still don't think it's a great idea. But
I have a couple strongmen competitors who like Tren and D-ball together, and it seems to work pretty proficient.
There's some weird magic there. I don't know what that is. It's probably because D-ball.
It's probably the methyl estradiol, right?
And D-ball doesn't use the androgen receptor, so.
And mass moves mass. So if you're trying to move strength, likely you'd want to put on a bit of water weight and allow yourself a cushion.
And and D-ball is weird. We did a study with rats where you actually, if you remove the pituitary gland and you give them Dianabol, the Dianabol has no effect. So somehow it's controlled through that mechanism. It's not like other steroids. So
that's interesting.
He's actually proposed that it's possible that it's doing something with growth hormone, and we just don't know.
That'd be really fascinating.
I'll send you that. That's pretty cool, though.
Yeah.
Well, we'll have to do D-ball. That one will get a lot of views. People love D-ball.
Yeah. You have to make a cool thumbnail for that one.
Yeah, we could do. What's his name?
The bloated red guy with acne.
No, the guy who wrote the books in the 80s. He died.
Dan Duchesne.
Wasn't his mailing list called like what's the guy's name who invented D-ball?
I don't remember.
You're catching me on a bad day.
It was called the something fan club was the name of his like mailing address.
I will tell you. John Bosley Ziegler.
It was like called the John Ziegler fan club or something was the name of his newsletter that he would send out.
That's so awesome.
Dan was an interesting guy.
I mean, Dan did a lot with what he had, right? I mean, he was the first one. There was nothing except medical literature.
He was a real biohacker as far as like experimentation. I've seen some wild stories with like the article he wrote on that. It was like, I can't remember. It was so old. From Fat to Fit or something. It was like this competitor. She was a female, way too fat in her off season. Then he used DNP to like talk about how he pushed her down. It was just like the wildest shit you'd hear on that thing.
I remember I ordered I'm dating myself. It was back in the 90s. There was like the the classifieds in the back of the muscle magazines. It was like ordering porn, but what I ordered Dan Duchesne's Underground Steroid handbook from the back of the magazine. I felt like I was doing something dirty or or illegal.
Wait, Paul, I have something really funny to show you.
Yeah, I remember getting that book in the mail. It came in like a brown manila envelope, and I'm like hiding it from. I think I was still living at home with my parents at that time. I was like hiding it from my parents.
That's so awesome. You don't want them to see. It's funny because at the time it was groundbreaking, but now it's just like, holy shit, there's a lot of misinformation.
Yeah, you go back there and look at it now, and it's pretty terrible. But and people are probably going to be saying the same thing about the stuff we say.
Yeah, true.
20 years down the road.
Paul, this is not quite as old as that, but do you remember?
Oh yeah.
Holy shit.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, I've seen one of those. You should laminate that, man. Oh,
I've never seen the one of them. They used to come in the mail.
Holy shit.
I have a whole collection of old bodybuilding books. I got to dig them out sometime and show them on here because people would shit their pants. Like I have the original Blood and Guts by Dorian Yates, and
you have like Body Opus, and I mean it's not super old, but like Body Opus, and there's a couple other ones in my room.
That's a pretty bad diet right there.
Yeah.
Dante Trudel used to have his newsletter. He used to put out, and I think it was the Underground something. I don't remember what he called it, but it was back in the 90s. It used to be like stapled together paper get in the mail.
That's so
but awesome. I had that. All right, guys, let's wrap this up. I appreciate you coming on. Thank you, Kurt, for all your information. Folks, if you want to get a hold of Kurt, it's atomiclifecoaching.com, right?
Atomiclifefitness.com.
Atomic Life Fitness, sorry. And I will put a link in the video description below. Thank you for watching.